I can still hear the echo of that night. The night everything I knew about love, loyalty, and family was ripped apart. The rain outside fell like shattered glass against the old window panes, and I stood there, 16, trembling, soaked, and unwanted. My stepmother's voice tore through the storm like lightning. "You bankrupted us, you worthless brat. Get out of my house." Those words carved themselves into my memory so deeply that even now, decades later, they haunt me in silence. I didn't understand. How could I have bankrupted anyone? I was just a kid, a boy still trying to figure out why his father's laughter had been replaced by the sound of hospital monitors, and why the woman who once tucked me into bed now looked at me as if I were poison. My father had died 3 months earlier. Lung cancer, a man of strength and principle reduced to a frail shadow before my eyes. He was everything to me, my guide, my hero, my safe place. When he passed, I thought at least I still had a home, a family. But I was wrong. Monica, my stepmother, made sure of that. She was elegance wrapped in venom. The kind of woman who smiled in public but sharpened her words in private. When my father was alive, she played the part of a devoted wife and caring stepmother. But the moment the funeral flowers wilted, her mask slipped. It started small. Cold glances. Silence at the dinner table. Then the blame. The bills are piling up. The business is failing. Your father left us nothing but debt. And somehow, I became the reason for it all. When she shouted that I had bankrupted her, I realized she wasn't talking about money. She was talking about control. I reminded her of him, of everything she wanted to erase. I remember standing at the threshold, clutching my father's old wristwatch, the rain soaking through my clothes. The door slammed behind me, and in that single moment I understood what true abandonment felt like. I had no money. No family, no plan, just a watch and a broken heart. That night I slept under the flickering light of an abandoned bus stop. The world was silent except for the sound of my own breathing and the faint ticking of my father's watch. I wanted to believe he could still hear me somehow. "Dad," I whispered into the darkness, "why did you leave me with her?" There was no answer, just the wind brushing cold against my face. In the days that followed, hunger became my teacher. I learned the price of a loaf of bread, the weight of humiliation, and the taste of rainwater collected from a gutter. I searched for odd jobs, anything that would earn me a meal. I swept floors in diners, washed dishes until my fingers cracked, and slept behind trash bins wrapped in discarded newspapers. People walked by without seeing me. To them I was invisible, a stain on the sidewalk, but life has a strange way of sending you what you need, even when it comes in unexpected forms. One night, while cleaning tables at a small roadside diner, an old man sat down in my section. He had rough hands, eyes full of kindness, and a quiet dignity that reminded me of my father. His name was Frank Dalton. He noticed how I kept wiping the same table over and over, just to avoid going home to nowhere. He asked my name, my age, and finally, where my family was. When I told him, he didn't pity me. He just nodded and said something I'd never forget. "Son, the world will break you, test you, and leave you in the mud. But that's how gold is purified, in fire. Don't let this fire burn you. Let it forge you." That night, Frank bought me a warm meal and offered me a job in his small carpentry shop. Working with Frank became my salvation. I started learning the craft, cutting, shaping, sanding wood until my fingers blistered. He taught me more than carpentry. He taught me discipline, pride, and silence. "Every piece of wood," he said, "has a story. Some are twisted, scarred, or broken, but under the surface there's beauty, if you're patient enough to find it." Those words became my mantra. Every nail I drove, every board I repaired, I imagined rebuilding myself in the process. I didn't have money, but I had purpose. And for the first time since my father's death, I felt something close to hope. But hope doesn't erase pain. It only teaches you to live with it. At night, I would sit outside the shop staring at the stars, holding my father's watch in my palm. I would replay every moment of my past. My mother's laughter before she passed. My father's hands guiding mine as I built my first birdhouse. The sound of Monica's voice when she told me I was nothing. That voice echoed in my mind like a curse. You'll never be anything. I promised myself she would be wrong, not out of revenge, but out of survival. Frank became more than a mentor. He became the family I'd lost. He saw something in me that others didn't, and one day, after watching me spend weeks perfecting a single handcrafted chair, he smiled and said, "You've got the hands of a builder but the heart of a fighter. Never lose either." He helped me apply for a construction apprenticeship program. It was my ticket out of the small town that had become my cage. By 18, I packed what little I owned, that same duffel bag, and left. Leaving behind the past wasn't easy. I still dreamed about the night I was thrown out. I still saw my stepmother's face, cold and triumphant, but I also carried Frank's words with me. Let it forge you. The city was cruel at first. I was surrounded by men twice my age, hardened by years of labor and disappointment. They laughed at my thin frame, called me kid, and made me do the dirtiest jobs, but I didn't complain. I learned. I absorbed. I spent every hour I could mastering the craft, construction design, property management, architecture basics, anything that would make me better than the boy I used to be. By 21, I was promoted to a foreman position. I worked 12-hour days and studied business courses at night. My social life was non-existent, but my dream burned brighter than loneliness, and deep down, I had one vision: to build something with my name on it. Because the woman who threw me away had taken everything, except my will to rise. Still, I couldn't forget her. Sometimes, when I saw wealthy families dining together, I'd imagine what she was doing. Whether she was still living in my father's house, still blaming me for her misfortunes, I'd imagine her surrounded by the same luxury my father had built, pretending I never existed. It stung, but I kept working. Pain became my motivator. Then one day I received a call that cracked the past wide open. Frank had died. A heart attack in his sleep. When I returned to the small town for his funeral, I found a sealed envelope waiting for me. Inside was a short note in his shaky handwriting. You were the son I never had. Don't build to prove them wrong. Build to prove yourself right. The world owes you nothing, but you owe yourself everything. That was the last lesson he gave me, and from that moment on, I made myself a promise. I would build an empire, not out of spite, but out of purpose. When I turned 25, I founded my first construction company, Ellis Rebuilds. It wasn't glamorous and just me, one van and a handful of tools, but I poured my soul into it. I worked on weekends, took every job no one else wanted, and treated every client like they were the foundation of something bigger. And slowly word spread. People trusted my work. They respected my integrity. By 30, I had multiple crews. By 35, we were one of the fastest growing development firms in the state. Success came, but it didn't heal everything. No matter how high I climbed, there was a part of me still trapped in that rainy night. The boy with a broken heart and a muddy watch, and sometimes, success feels lonelier than failure. Because when you finally have everything, you realize you still can't go back and fix what was broken. Then, one morning, 20 years after that night, I received a letter that would change everything. It came from a law firm in another city. The paper was thick, formal, expensive. The kind of thing rich people use for serious matters. I opened it, expecting maybe a business proposal or tax issue. But the first line froze me. Dear Mr. Ellis, you are the sole beneficiary of the estate of Mr. Gregory Bennett. Gregory Bennett. I didn't know the name. The letter went on to explain that he was my biological grandfather. My father's estranged father. They'd fallen out decades ago, long before I was born.
He had tracked me down quietly after my father's death and had been following my life's progress for years. He had recently passed away.
And in his will he left me his entire estate, valued at $89 million. I stared at the page, my hands trembling. I read it again and again, but the words didn't feel real. $89 million. After years of scraping pennies, eating from vending machines and living in basements, it didn't make sense. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Then, at the bottom of the letter, was a handwritten note. To my grandson, I failed my son. Let me not fail you. Use what I leave you to build, not destroy. Remember, true wealth is not counted in dollars but in legacy. My throat tightened. For the first time in years I wept. Not for the money, not even for him, but for the chain of pain that had finally broken. I thought of my father, of Frank, of every night I'd slept hungry and alone, and I realized this was my full circle moment. But fate wasn't done with me yet. Because a week later, she called. My stepmother, the woman who had thrown me into the rain, who had told me I was worthless. Her voice was older now, brittle with age. But the manipulation was still there. Sweetheart, she said softly, I heard about your success, about the inheritance. I'm so proud of you. You know, I always wanted what's best for you. I didn't respond. My silence made her nervous, then she sighed. I'm in trouble, honey. The house is being taken by the bank. I don't have anyone else to turn to. I almost laughed. The universe has a cruel sense of humor sometimes. Her voice trembled on the phone, a mixture of guilt, fear, and the same charm she'd once used to deceive my father. I don't have anyone else to turn to, she whispered. For 20 years I'd imagined this call, the voice that had thrown me out into the rain now asking me for help. I should have felt vindicated, powerful. Instead, I felt nothing, just a hollow ache. I agreed to meet her, not for revenge, but for closure. When I drove back to my hometown, everything felt smaller. The streets that once towered over me now seemed tired and gray. Even the air carried the scent of memories I thought I'd buried. The house, her house, was falling apart. Paint peeled from the shutters. The yard was wild with weeds. She opened the door, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The woman who had once been sharp and glamorous now stood before me in a faded robe, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes sunk deep. You look just like him, she said softly. I stepped inside. The same hallway where she'd once screamed at me now smelled of dust and regret. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd made me sign away my father's company shares. She stared at her hands and whispered, I made mistakes. You didn't make mistakes, I said quietly. You made choices. Her eyes filled with tears. I was scared. After your father died, I didn't know what to do. I thought you were just another mouth to feed. I took the easy way out. I nodded. You took my way out. Silence filled the room. Finally, she said, Can you forgive me? I looked at her, at the woman who'd made me believe I was worthless, and I realized something extraordinary. I already had. Not for her, but for myself, because hate had lived rent-free in my heart for too long. I forgave you years ago, I said, but I can't forget what you taught me. She frowned. What did I teach you? I smiled faintly. That pain is temporary, but what you build from it lasts forever. The inheritance changed my life overnight, but I refused to let it change who I was. Money was a tool, not a trophy. I expanded my construction company, opening branches across the state. I invested in renewable housing projects, rebuilt low-income neighborhoods, and created jobs for hundreds of workers who'd once struggled like me. But even as success poured in, I remembered Frank's words. Don't build to prove them wrong. Build to prove yourself right. So I founded the Ellis Foundation, dedicated to helping homeless teens, kids abandoned just like I was. Every shelter we built carried the same message etched on a plaque by the door. No child left in the rain. The first night we opened our doors, dozens of kids lined up outside. I walked among them quietly, offering smiles, handshakes, hope. One boy, maybe 16, clutched a worn backpack and wouldn't look me in the eye. I knelt beside him. "What's your name?" "Leo," he mumbled. "You got somewhere to go tonight, Leo?" He shook his head. "Then you're home," I said. He looked up, eyes wide. "Why are you helping us?" I smiled. "Because someone once threw me away and I promised myself no one else would feel that way." That night, as I watched the kids eating warm food and laughing for the first time in who knows how long, I realized I'd finally found what I'd been searching for: peace. But peace doesn't mean the past stays buried. A year later, I received another call from Monica's number. I hesitated before answering. Her voice was weak. "I'm sick," she said. "Cancer. They say it's bad." I felt the universe hold its breath. The same disease that took my father had come for her. "I don't deserve your help," she said. "But I'm scared to die alone." I closed my eyes. The boy inside me screamed, "Leave her," but the man I'd become whispered, "Go." So I went. I visited her in a small hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and fading hope. She was fragile, bones under skin. The woman who once commanded fear now couldn't even lift a glass of water without shaking. She looked at me and whispered, "I see him when I look at you. Your father." I ruined everything. Tears welled in my eyes. "You didn't ruin everything," I said softly. "You just made room for me to build something new." I paid for her treatment, not because she deserved it, but because it was the right thing to do. I sat by her bedside every Sunday, reading the newspaper aloud, just as my father once did for me. One evening she took my hand and said, "You turned out to be a good man despite me." "No," I said, "because of you." She smiled faintly, and that was the last time I saw her alive. When she passed, I didn't cry out of grief. I cried out of release. The circle was complete. I arranged a simple funeral. No luxury, no spectacle, just closure. On her tombstone I had carved a single line: "Forgiveness is freedom." People asked why I'd bother honoring her. They didn't understand that forgiveness isn't approval, it's liberation. Afterward, I drove to the hill overlooking my father's grave, the same hill where he once taught me how to build a kite that could catch even the weakest wind. I placed his old wristwatch on the stone, the one that had survived the rain, the hunger, and every storm between. "Dad," I whispered, "I did it. I made something of the name you gave me." The wind brushed against my face, gentle and warm, and for the first time in decades, I felt like that 16-year-old boy could finally rest. People often ask me what the $89 million changed. Truth, it didn't change me. It revealed who I already was. Money can't buy resilience. It can't erase pain or purchase purpose, but it can amplify what already lives inside you, whether that's bitterness or grace. I chose grace. I rebuilt schools in small towns, sponsored scholarships for kids from broken homes, helped ex-convicts learn construction trades so they could rebuild their lives too. Every time I hand a young worker his first paycheck, I see my younger self, scared, dirty, but hungry for a chance. And every time I tell them the same thing Frank once told me: "The world will try to break you, let it, then show it what you're made of." The years rolled forward like waves against a steady shore. Success no longer excited me the way it once had. Peace did. Every morning I woke before sunrise, brewed coffee, and stood at the window watching the city wake up. The same city that had once ignored the hungry, invisible boy I used to be. And I smiled knowing that somewhere out there, a kid would be sleeping in one of our shelters instead of on a cold street. That knowledge was worth more than every dollar in my bank account. One winter morning, a letter arrived. It was handwritten, sealed with the emblem of the very hospital where my stepmother had spent her final days. I opened it carefully. Inside was a note from one of the nurses who had cared for her. "Your stepmother asked me to give you this if she passed before you came again." Inside the envelope was a small velvet pouch and my father's wedding ring. There was also a folded letter, the ink shaky and uneven. "Dear James," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I've finally run out of time to say what I should have said years ago. I took everything from you because I thought the world had taken everything from me. I wanted control, power, security, things I believed your father owed me. But I see now I was only trying to fill the emptiness he left. I told myself I hated you because you reminded me of him. The truth is, you reminded me of who I could never be. You were good even when the world wasn't. Thank you for forgiving me when I didn't deserve it. I hope you use that heart to heal others, not to harden yourself." By the time I reached the end, the paper was blurred by my tears. That was the last ghost of my past. Gone. I slipped the ring onto a chain and wore it around my neck. A symbol not of pain but of peace. A few months later, I drove back to the town where it all began. The diner where I'd met Frank was still there, though the sign was faded and the chairs squeaked a little louder than before. I sat in the same booth where he had once bought me a meal and told me that fire forges gold. This time, I ordered 2 cups of coffee. One for me, and one for him. I whispered into the empty seat. "You were right, old man. The fire didn't burn me, it built me." When I stepped outside, a young man was sitting by the curb, shivering in the cold, staring at the ground the same way I once had. I walked over, placed a $20 bill in his hand, and said, "Get yourself something warm to eat." He looked up and murmured, "Why are you helping me?" I smiled, the same smile Frank once gave me. Because someone helped me once, and I never forgot. Months later, I was invited to speak at a youth summit. Hundreds of teenagers from foster homes, shelters, and troubled families gathered in one hall, their eyes full of questions about survival and hope. Standing on that stage, I looked at them and saw pieces of my own story in every face. I began with the truth. When I was 16, I was thrown out of my home in the middle of a storm. My stepmother said I bankrupted her, but what she didn't know was that she was freeing me. That night the world didn't end, it began. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. I told them about Frank, about the lessons in the carpentry shop, the hunger that taught me humility, and the rain that washed away everything fake so the real me could grow. I told them about pain, not to glorify it, but to remind them that it doesn't last forever. Pain, I said, is a tool. If you grip it too long, it cuts you. But if you learn how to hold it right, it shapes you. Faces began to soften. Tears glistened. I spoke about forgiveness, about standing in the same kitchen where I had been told I was worthless and finding the strength to forgive the very person who broke me. Forgiveness, I said, isn't saying they were right. It's saying you won't let them own you anymore. Then I paused, letting the silence breathe before finishing. They might throw you out. They might tell you you'll never make it. But listen to me, you will. Because the world only defines you if you stop building. When I stepped off that stage, dozens of kids ran up to me, some crying, some hugging me, others simply saying thank you. And in that sea of young faces, I saw Leo, the boy from our shelter, standing tall, wearing a volunteer badge. He smiled and said, "I'm studying construction. I want to work for you one day." That was the moment I knew my father, Frank, even Monica. They were all part of a bigger design. The pain wasn't wasted. It was transformed. With time, I learned that the inheritance wasn't just money. It was a responsibility. I used it to expand the foundation globally, building schools and training centers in underprivileged regions. I made sure every building had a plaque with the same words etched in steel. Built from broken pieces. Because that's what I was. And maybe that's what we all are. Broken pieces trying to build something whole. But there's beauty in that. Because once you've been broken, you understand what it means to be rebuilt. And that's what life is. A constant rebuilding. On the 20th anniversary of my company, I held a small gathering at the headquarters. A celebration not of money, but of people. Workers who had started as janitors were now managers. Kids from shelters were now architects and project leaders. Every person in that room was living proof that hardship doesn't have to define you. As the applause faded, I took the microphone and said quietly, 20 years ago, I had nothing but a duffel bag and my father's watch. Today I stand here surrounded by family, not by blood but by choice. Then I held up the watch, the ring around my neck glinting in the light. This is what legacy looks like. Not the gold, not the millions, but the lives rebuilt from the ashes. Weeks later I visited my father's grave again. I brought fresh flowers and sat beside him, the sun dipping low behind the hills. You know, Dad, I whispered, I used to think Monica ruined me. But she just rerouted me. She pushed me onto the road you meant for me all along. I looked up at the sky, the same wide, forgiving sky that had once watched me cry in the rain. You were right to believe in hard work and kindness and forgiveness, because those things built everything I am. And if you can hear me, thank you for the watch. It never stopped ticking, I smiled. Neither did I. So if you're listening to this and life has thrown you out into your own storm, remember this. You are not what they did to you. You are what you do next. The rain might soak you, the world might turn its back. But one day you'll look back and realize the storm didn't destroy you. It cleansed you. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every you'll never make it becomes the foundation for the life you'll build. Let them say you can't. Let them walk away. Then rise. Quietly, relentlessly, beautifully. Because one day, you'll stand where I stand, not angry, not bitter, but free. And when that day comes, you'll understand what I did the night I forgave her. Sometimes the people who break you are the same ones who set you free. When my stepmother screamed, "You bankrupted us," she thought she was destroying me, but the truth, she bankrupted my past, so I could invest in my future, and that future wasn't just 89 million in money, it was worth far more, in peace, forgiveness, and purpose. So to every soul listening right now, standing in their own storm, remember this. Don't let the pain define you. Let it design you, because the moment you decide to rise, you've already won.